The wrong train, the right moment. Jake Adams had it all. A luxury penthouse in Manhattan, tailored suits worth more than most people's cars, and a title that made people tremble in boardrooms. CEO of a tech empire valued in the billions. But on this particular foggy morning, surrounded by sleek skyscrapers and the scent of burnt espresso from his usual cafe, something unusual happened. Something that would change everything. He missed his train. Or rather, he took the wrong one. It wasn't until he was 40 minutes into the journey, surrounded not by the suited and booted crowd he usually mingled with, but by a handful of elderly travelers and a group of kids on a school trip, that Jake realized something was terribly off. He frowned at the window, watching the city blur into countryside. "This can't be right," he muttered. Pulling out his phone, he checked the app. Wrong train. Wrong direction. No signal. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from the jarring realization that for the first time in years, he had no control. No personal assistant to fix it. No private jet to reroute. Just him. And a train rumbling toward nowhere. And that's exactly where the story begins. Main story. Jake Adams had built his life on control. Every minute of his day was calculated. Meetings scheduled down to the second. Even his sleep was optimized by a digital monitor that tracked every breath. But when he'd run into the station that morning, too distracted by investor calls and press releases, he hadn't looked twice at the platform sign. He just got on the train and took a seat. He expected to arrive in Boston for a high-stakes merger. Instead, hours later, he found himself stepping off a near-empty train into the middle of a town so small, so unfamiliar, he didn't even know its name until he saw it on a hand-painted sign above the platform. Waverly Pines. The platform was deserted except for an older man with a cap reading Railroad Days Festival, 1987. He tipped his head politely to Jake as he passed, a gesture Jake hadn't seen in decades. Jake looked around, confused. No Uber signs, no sleek black town cars, no digital kiosks, just warm air, chirping birds, and trees. Lots of trees. "This isn't real," he whispered. "This has to be a mistake." Jake rushed inside the tiny station and approached a bored-looking station attendant. "When's the next train to Boston?" "Tomorrow morning. Earliest is 7:45. She replied without looking up from her crossword. "Tomorrow," Jake echoed, exasperated. "There's nothing sooner." She shrugged. "We're not exactly a transportation hub, sir. Welcome to Waverly Pines." With a heavy sigh and 1,000 thoughts racing through his mind. Investors, deadlines, quarterly reports. Jake stepped out of the station and into the quietest street he had ever seen. Cobblestone roads stretched in both directions. A bookstore, a flower shop, a post office with a cat sleeping in the window. The place looked like it hadn't changed in 50 years. "This place is frozen in time," Jake muttered. And then she appeared. A woman, probably in her late 20s, stood by a market stall arranging jars of honey. She wore a pale yellow sundress and had long chestnut hair tied loosely in a braid. Her movements were slow and purposeful, like someone who had no interest in rushing. Jake wouldn't have noticed her, if not for the moment she looked up and caught him staring. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just looked at him. Really looked at him. Like she could see through the expensive shoes and custom-tailored suit right into the restlessness he tried so hard to hide. Jake looked away. "What the hell is wrong with me?" he thought. With nowhere else to go, Jake wandered toward the town square. He passed a diner with checkered floors and handwritten chalk signs. He passed an art studio where children were finger painting. He passed a dog walker wrangling 5 golden retrievers, all of whom wagged their tails at him like he was a celebrity. And all around him, people smiled. At him. He wasn't used to that. Back home, smiles meant you wanted something. Here, they felt real. But Jake couldn't relax. He kept checking his phone. Still no signal. No Wi-Fi. Of course, he muttered. The one day I forget my satellite hotspot. He plopped down on a park bench, finally exhausted. For once, he wasn't being chased by anyone, but he still felt hunted. Hunted by his own schedule, his own expectations, his own loneliness. Then, she appeared again. The honey girl. Only this time, she wasn't arranging jars. She was walking toward him, holding 2 ice cream cones. She stopped in front of him and offered one with a simple smile. Jake blinked. I don't eat sugar, he said automatically. She shrugged. It's peach. Locally made. You look like you could use something sweet. He hesitated, then took it. She sat beside him without asking and took a slow, thoughtful lick of her cone. You're not from around here, she said, glancing at his Italian loafers. Was it the shoes? He replied with a smirk. It was the panic in your eyes, she said. Jake laughed. It caught him off guard. He hadn't laughed like that in months. I'm Jake, he said. Sophia. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. I took the wrong train, Jake admitted after a long pause. Ended up here by accident. Maybe it wasn't an accident, Sophia replied. Maybe the universe decided you needed a break. Jake raised an eyebrow. You believe in that kind of thing? She smiled and took another bite of ice cream. I believe that sometimes the wrong train takes you to the right place. Jake looked at her, the small town, the quiet streets, the warmth of the sun, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he wasn't sure he wanted to leave. A town that taught him to breathe. The sun had begun its descent, bathing Waverly Pines in a soft golden light. Jake and Sophia sat on the park bench, half-melted ice cream dripping onto their fingers, but neither of them seemed to care. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Jake didn't feel the need to check the time. And that scared him. This wasn't just about missing a train anymore. It was about realizing he had been missing out on life. Jake followed Sophia through winding streets that still smelled of fresh pine and summer blooms. They passed hand-painted signs that read Antique Treasures, the Barkery, a dog treat shop, and Mamalu's Book Nook. Every store had character. Every face seemed familiar, even though Jake had never been here before. It was like the town welcomed him without saying a word. Do you want to see something beautiful? Sophia asked suddenly. Jake hesitated. Sure. Why not? She led him past rows of willow trees, down a dirt path behind a tiny chapel. At the end of the path was a field of tall grass that opened up to a lake, so still it looked like glass. The reflection of the sky shimmered in its surface. Fireflies danced lazily in the air. Jake just stared. For a man who built his empire on skyscrapers and LED screens, the natural stillness hit like a wave. People in the city don't stop to see things like this, do they? Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Jake admitted. We see numbers, deadlines, and metrics. Not this. Sophia sat on a worn wooden bench by the water, motioning for him to join. He sat beside her slowly, letting the silence sink in. There was no pressure here. No buzz of notifications, just wind, water, and a woman who looked at him like he was human, not a headline. Do you miss it? He asked. The rush, the noise, the thrill of chasing something bigger. Sophia thought for a long moment. I left the city 5 years ago. I was a junior architect at a high-end firm. I lived in a high-rise apartment and wore pencil skirts and heels every day. I had a gym membership, a gold card, and insomnia. Jake turned to her, stunned. You were in the corporate world. She nodded. I was. Until the morning I collapsed on a subway platform from exhaustion. They ran tests. Said I. People waved to Sophia as they passed. Who's your friend? One old man called out. Just a traveler, she replied, winking at Jake. He chuckled. That's one way to describe a CEO who took the wrong train. They shared cotton candy and laughed over its sticky mess. They played ring toss, Jake, who hadn't played a carnival game since childhood, won Sophia a plush owl. Her face lit up like a child's, and he realized something he never had before. He wanted to make her smile again and again. Later, they found themselves sitting at a picnic table beneath the glow of string lights. A small band was setting up on a raised wooden platform. "Dance with me?" Sophia asked, standing and holding out her hand. Jake blinked. "I haven't danced in years. I'm terrible." "That's perfect. So am I." Reluctantly, Jake followed her to the floor. At first, he moved awkwardly, stiff from years of structure and control. But Sophia just laughed, guiding him gently. No pressure, no rhythm to match but their own. As the music swelled into a soft, dreamy tune, something changed. Jake relaxed. He let go. And for a moment, he wasn't the CEO of a billion-dollar company. He was just a man holding a woman beneath the stars. Sophia leaned in closer. "You're not as bad as you think." Jake chuckled. "You haven't seen me try the two-step." She smiled and said nothing. Their eyes met, and in that second, it was as if the rest of the world faded away. After the dance, they sat on the wooden steps of the bandstand. Jake looked down at his phone. Still no signal, but for once, he didn't care. "You know," he said, "I have assistants who panic if I don't respond for 15 minutes. I've been offline for almost 12 hours. Sophia grinned. "Good. Maybe they'll learn you're not a robot." Jake laughed, then grew quiet. "Do you think people like us, people who ran toward success for so long, can actually change?" Sophia didn't answer right away. "I think, if you stop long enough to ask that question, you're already on your way." Jake stared at her, and then he said something he hadn't said to anyone in years. "I'm tired. I'm tired of pretending. Of smiling for stock photos. Of attending events where no one knows me, but everyone wants something from me." Sophia reached out and took his hand. Her touch was warm, grounding. "You don't have to be that person here." And Jake believed her. That night, Jake checked into the only inn in town, a quaint little place called the Wishing Tree Inn. The owner was a gray-haired widow named Darlene who insisted he try her homemade peach cobbler before bed. He sat on the edge of the bed later, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow he'd go back. The train left at 7:45. His schedule would resume. His investors would be waiting. But a thought lingered. What if I didn't go back tomorrow? What if the world wouldn't end if he stayed one more day? Maybe, for the first time in a long time, Jake had finally found a reason to stop running. Maybe he was ready to be found. The train back, or the road forward. Morning light poured gently into the small, lace-curtained room at the Wishing Tree Inn. The birds outside chirped their usual chorus, but inside room number 2, Jake Adams sat awake, fully dressed, staring at the train ticket in his hand. 7:45 m, Platform 1. One way back to everything he had built, and away from everything he didn't know he needed. He had barely slept. His mind played back every moment from yesterday. The laughter, the music, the lake, the way Sophia had looked at him, not with judgment, not with awe, but with something much deeper. Recognition. She hadn't seen the CEO. She had seen him. He had a conference call scheduled at noon. A media interview lined up for 3 o'clock. His assistant had left 47 texts. His inbox had 326 unread emails. He was expected, needed, worshipped. But none of those voices mattered now, because all Jake could think about was her. At exactly 7:18 a.m., Jake stood on the platform. The air was crisp. The train was minutes away. The morning fog still clung to the tracks like a question waiting to be answered. Sophia hadn't come to say goodbye. He didn't blame her. They had shared a single day, a single night. How could he expect her to wait for someone who might disappear the moment life came calling again? Yet, something inside him whispered, "If you leave now, you'll regret it forever." But he didn't move. The train whistle blew in the distance. Jake closed his eyes, and that's when he heard a voice. "You look like a man trying to run away from his own shadow." He turned. Sophia, standing there with 2 paper cups of coffee and a knowing smile that made his breath hitch. "I thought you weren't coming," he said. "I thought you were already gone." "I almost was." They stood in silence for a moment. The train rolled into the station, slow and metallic, breaking the peace of the morning. Jake glanced at it, then back at her. Sophia held out the coffee. "One last drink before you go." He took it with a trembling hand. "This place," he said. It's changed me." Sophia's eyes softened. "You changed yourself. This place just gave you permission." "I'm scared," Jake admitted. "If I stay, what happens to everything I've built? My company, my image, the life I spent years perfecting." Sophia's answer was simple. "Maybe it's time to ask yourself if what you built was ever really you, or just a mask you wore long enough that you started to believe it." The train hissed and opened its doors. Jake stared at them. His hand tightened around the ticket. This was his last chance. Go back to the life he knew, or stay and step into the unknown. He didn't move. The conductor called out, "Final boarding." Still, Jake didn't move. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said quietly. Sophia didn't try to convince him. She didn't beg him to stay. She didn't even reach for his hand. She just nodded. "That's okay." Sometimes not knowing is where everything begins. The train doors began to close, and Jake stepped back. He didn't board. The train pulled away, rumbling into the morning mist. Jake stood frozen, his heart racing. "I missed it," he said breathlessly. Sophia smiled. "Or maybe you finally caught something." That afternoon, the townsfolk saw Jake again, this time not as a lost man in a fancy suit, but as someone walking a little slower, standing a little taller, and smiling like he meant it. He helped an elderly woman carry groceries. He bought a used paperback from Mama Lou's bookstore and sat in the park reading it. He joined a group of teenagers painting a mural on a blank wall. He even fed ducks by the pond. And later, he found Sophia again by the lakeside. "I don't know what this is between us," he said. "I don't know what it becomes. But I know I don't want to leave without seeing where it could go." Sophia didn't answer right away. She looked out at the water. "Are you sure you're ready to stop chasing the noise?" Jake nodded. "I'm ready to start hearing my own voice." Sophia turned to him. "Then come back to the lake tomorrow. I'll show you how to paddle a boat that leaks." He laughed. "Deal." 1 week later, Jake had extended his stay. Then he canceled 2 meetings. Then he had his assistant reroute all calls to voicemail. By the 2nd week, he did something no one, not even his board of directors, expected. He took a leave of absence. Unpaid. Indefinite. Jake rented a small cottage near the woods. The kitchen sink leaked. The Wi-Fi barely worked. The coffee machine took 10 minutes to warm up. He loved every minute of it. He started baking, jogging, laughing, and every day he spent time with Sophia. They talked about everything and nothing. One afternoon, while lying in the grass watching clouds drift by, he turned to her. "Do you believe in fate?" Sophia smiled. "I believe in choices." Jake looked up at the sky. "Well then, thank you for helping me make the right one." 3 months later, Waverly Pines had a new part-time volunteer at the library, a man who read to kids, helped teens build websites, and occasionally showed up at town hall meetings with ideas for solar panels. He still wore tailored shirts, but now with rolled-up sleeves and grass stains on his knees. He had no title, no boardroom, just a small name tag that read, Jake. And one day, he stood in front of a small group in the town square and told them the truth. "I thought I had it all, but it wasn't until I lost my way that I found what truly mattered." The crowd clapped, but only one face in the crowd truly mattered. Sophia's. She clapped the loudest. Epilogue. They didn't rush things. There was no dramatic proposal. Just two people who sat by the lake every day, sipping coffee and dreaming of a life built on love, simplicity, and truth. Jake didn't need the world's approval anymore. He had found something better. A quiet town, a gentle rhythm, and a woman who reminded him that sometimes the wrong train doesn't just take you away from your life. It takes you exactly where your heart belongs.